right. Let's just do this. Let me make sure. I'm a little paranoid about this, so I'm gonna make sure this is showing up. Yeah, no, I've been good. I was having outstanding. All right. Yeah. All right. Now we're live. So all of the stuff, when we first went live, when you heard Lance say all those racist things about Albanian people, those were strictly jokes. He doesn't think any of that for real.
Of course. Naturally, no. I've purged those thoughts from my mind.
Yeah, speaking of purging thoughts from your minds, I see a friend of the show, Jesse Lee Peterson, might be having some struggles.
Oh my! How familiar are you with the struggles themselves?
I saw like the first 3 minutes of that Humanist Report video about it, so I know that he liked some gay porn on his public Twitter, and then locked it immediately after.
All right.
Afterwards,
I was
thus
curious
making it pretty clear he was going back and making sure he hadn't liked anything else on that account.
Amazing. That's all I can say about that. Yeah, I mean, it's like that Simpsons quote. It's like, "Does an innocent man flee?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, like at first I would have thought like you could have chalked that up to any kind of behavior. Maybe he was just it was a staffer. It was a late night accident or something like that. You just come out the next day and you're like you do a Ted Cruz, right?
Right.
But if your response is absolute silence and just locking your account, that's a little. oh my. Fantastic.
Yeah. In the unlikely event that anybody watching this isn't familiar with the Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, he is basically, if you ever watched the TV show version of the Boondocks, and you remember the Uncle Ruckus character, that's basically
that has been a frequent reference. He's an interesting fellow, to say the least. And I was going to say he's had some choice encounters with you, Ben, a number of times.
He has, yeah. So I will say that when I went on a show, this was last year. I think it was over the summer, maybe like 2019, if I'm remembering right. And I had no idea who he was. Like his producer reached out to me. It was like, "Hey, you want to be on this show?" And has all the subscribers, whatever. I think
that's right. You didn't know beforehand, right?
No, I had no clue. Right?
Wow.
Like I think all he said to describe him was Black Reverend.
All right, go on.
Yeah. So then, yes, or Stephen from Django. I was actually thinking about that earlier. Although I think that character himself, at least the way that they made up Samuel L. Jackson for the role, was very inspired by Uncle Ruckus. But yeah, so the night before, I think I finally thought, maybe I should like Wikipedia this guy, see who he is. And then I was like, oh wow, all right, he is extremely right wing. And then it was like, all right, well, whatever, be a hostile interview. I've had hostile interviews before. It's not a big deal. Like I'll it's fine, right? I can debate this guy. And then I went on with that expectation, and it was by far the strangest encounter that I've ever done in media. Because so he is a extremely ardent social conservative. I mean, that's why his particular porn preferences are funny, because he, in fact, actually, I think if you follow the breadcrumbs here, it might not be that shocking, because apparently he's talked many times on his show about how being gay is a choice and you can just stop yourself from doing it. So
yesterday I went in a deep dive and I watched all of his videos on the subject, including how to stop being a homosexual. He's very big into gay conversion therapy. And I went in there thinking this is going to be hilarious. I was using the whole thing as a setup for revealing the whole, secretly liking gay pornography. And it was really sad. It was a bunch of people calling into his show, some of them like 18 years old. And it's like, I love you. You're an inspiration. I'm gay. but like my family doesn't accept me. And he's like, what should I do? And then he just went off on like, you should change yourself. You can find the Lord. You should stop being gay, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it went from being hilarious to like I was genuinely depressed like halfway through, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I could see that. And you know, whatever. I mean, it's very consistent because he's also like, I mean, really, like, you know, his racial views are not far off from the Chappelle character, who is who's a blind black white supremacist, except that he knows, right? Like that's the so his views on sexuality maybe are consistent with the overall picture there. So yeah, all right. Now you bummed me out. I
thought this was a fun Halloween stream. All right.
Yeah. I was bring up Jesse Lee Peterson because I thought it was hilarious, and now I feel bad about it. But
no, that was my bad.
Fair enough. Yeah. No. So yeah, Jesse Lee Peterson. You know, very unsurprising that it turns out that his fixation with this particular issue has deeper roots, which reminds me of Elm Street 2.
Which, by the way, can I? Okay, is this are you setting this up? Is this going to be the whole?
Yeah, this is
the whole podcast.
No, this is going to be the whole thing. But this is going to be this is my extremely smooth transition to talking about this. We are going to go back to talking about politics, but I did want to give you a chance for a chunk here to weigh in on this.
Well, I'm trying to find your master list right now.
Okay,
I found it.
So last night we did a Halloween bonus episode with Freddie DeBoer because he also, as well as his political writings, he also has a movie blog. And on this movie blog, he did a ranking of all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So that would be 1 through 6. Then New Nightmare, Freddy versus Jason, and the 2010 remake. And I was delighted. I was delighted when I saw that he'd done this, right? Because I've spent so many hours of my life watching these movies, I never get a chance to talk about it. So I invited him on the show to talk about it. And then meanwhile, and I think when I told Lance that I was doing this, he said, he read over the blog post. He had some strong dissents, one of which I sort of agree with, one of which I disagree with. But I'm going to hand it over to you for this. So just to
before the blood sports begin, all right, and before we destroy our beautiful friendship in real time here, I have to ask: Are you a Nightmare on Elm Street super fan, or do you enjoy just the genre? Are you a big fan of horror films in general? Do you like 90s horror? Do you like slasher films? Maybe give me a little, like,
sure. Oh, and somebody in the chat says, apparently there's one where the souls of Freddy's young victims are pizza toppings. I believe that's Nightmare on Elm Street 5. But I certainly remember the scene very well. I know.
Oh, absolutely. Is that the same one that had the Nintendo murder? That one's one of my favorite. It's one of the worst nightmares. I think that might be 6, where it's like, now you're playing with power or something. It's so bad. Yeah. It's so cheesy.
No, that one is number 6. Freddy's Dead, which I like overall. Like it's very, like, that one is like very. It's like the one that's like the least grounded and most kind of gonzo and surreal, I think, of the sequels. Like it starts out with the sequence where Freddy is where somebody's having a dream sequence where their house is blowing in a tornado and Freddy comes by on a broomstick like the Wizard of Oz, which kind of sets the tone for the movie. I think there's also I think there might also be like a quote from Descartes or someone at the beginning about dreams. It's that's the one that I used to have the box set of the first 7 movies that had it was like the spines of the DVDs like showed this big image of like Freddy turned around, with the trench coat on, and And that one I remember came with a set of 3D glasses because of Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead, which includes a 3D sequence.
That is
where,
right. That is right.
As Freddie
I forgot about
DeBoer
that.
pointed out in the episode, they even include they even have like nonsensically one of the characters put on 3D glasses at the beginning of the sequence, so you know that it's coming up. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I'm a horror movie fan in general, and yeah, I do particularly. I think like 80s, 90s horror tends to be my bag, but those are some of my very favorites. Although I guess I should like differentiate a little bit, right? So, I think that, I mean, I really like Wes Craven in general, right? Like, if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, one of my hottest takes would be that I thought that It Follows was better than The Babadook. But
I don't know if that's a spicy take. They're both great. So you like modern horror too, as long as it's good.
Yeah. Although, like I said, that was a very like Craven-esque, kind of movie. I think.
There was definitely some homages there, no question.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that the first one is one of my very favorite movies. Like that, the first one is like one of my like maybe like 3 favorite horror movies. Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, and I guess this does preview some of our disagreement here on the half of your dissent that I disagree with, which is that I think that
don't steel man me. Don't steel man me. I have to I have to lay out my I have to ground some the axioms here first, Ben. All right.
Okay. Well, I'll let you ground your axioms.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I liked. So somebody in the chat says Hereditary is the best recently. I liked Hereditary, but I'll do the I'll do the similarly mildly spicy take there and say that out of that guy's movies, I actually thought that Midsommar was better, but I liked Hereditary.
Both those films, I know we're just going on tangent after tangent here. Those astounded me at how the scariest things about them were grounded in reality, in terms of like, it wasn't the supernatural stuff or the dream sequences. It was, I don't want to. I'm not gonna ruin, because oftentimes trailers ruin movies for me, and I have a big appreciation for the art of a good trailer, but sometimes, and very rarely, the trailer itself is actually woven into some of the shock. And the trailer of Hereditary sets you up for a different film that basically subverts that in the first, I think, 20 minutes, at which point I remember just being floored. Like, I was just sitting in the theater like, at what happens. And then the rest of the movies, it's all right. It's not nearly as scary as that. And then Midsommar, I think it's in the first like 5 minutes of it, you're like, this is dark. And it's dark, but it's like, it's humanly dark. It's not like ghosts and spirits and stuff like that. It's just like, oh yeah, like death is really fucked up, and then family death is sad, and like, it really he's good at that.
Yeah, they do this interesting thing where the first 5 minutes are just incredibly dark, and then there's like a little like comic relief for like a big chunk of the movie,
and then it gets very bright, very colorful and sunny and beautiful. Really good movie. I really like Midsommar.
No, if you've ever I think anybody who ever had like a part of their life where they took a bunch of psychedelic drugs, my friend Schmen tells me, that like that makes that movie especially disturbing. But,
I was like, Ben, are you going to get in trouble with your academia here? But sorry, it's a friend. Yeah,
my friend. Right.
Okay, so sorry. Let me.
So look, I think that like the original Nightmare on Elm Street, I think the original movie, that's like probably like one of my like maybe like 3 favorite horror movies. Like it's like I think like The Shining, The Thing, and that, right? Maybe, right? And so I absolutely love that movie. The rest of them, I find things to like in all of them, and they're all just ridiculously fun and watchable, right? But I don't think any of them are like good movies quite on that level. I think that the third is definitely the best of the sequels. I was talking about this with my little brother last night, and he had a nice analogy. It was like, oh yeah, it's like basically Nightmare on Elm Street X-Men, so of course it's good. But I think that the first is better than anything that came after it. I think, like, I remember in Scream, right, which is a Wes Craven movie. There's that line at the very beginning, right? You know, what's your favorite scary movie? Oh, about Nightmare on Elm Street. Those were scary movies. Yeah, the first one was. The rest were just dumb, right? That overstates it. But I think there's some truth to that. I would say, but that said, right, like, I do really enjoy almost all of those movies. Like any time outside of the pandemic, right? You know, that like somebody I was living in the same town with was like, it's like, hey, I'm gonna watch, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street 5. You know, you like want to come over and, you know, and like, you know, get some pizza and watch it. I'd say absolutely yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. But if I'm going through this list here, okay, first off, putting number 2 in last place is tantamount to sacrilege. Okay, number 2 is a fantastic film, and I'm gonna have to you know, dispute that, I guess, directly with your friend. I don't understand why that would be the case. Nightmare on Elm Street 3. I'm sorry, it's the best one. It's the best one by a large margin. I would disagree with you that it's not frightening. Maybe you watched it as an adult, or were you still in your teens? Because there are still some scary scenes in that one. The television one is one of the best Freddy deaths of any of the deaths. It might be the best Freddy death. I'm gonna put that. I'm going to put that out there.
So yeah, I watched all of these movies as an adult. In fact, I'd seen the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror parody of Nightmare on Elm Street, probably long before I watched Nightmare on Elm Street.
Fair.
But yeah, no, I watched them all as an adult. I think number 3 is clearly the best of the sequels, but I think number 1 is just a good movie in a different way than anything that followed it.
I think you're giving one extra credit for the fact that it is revolutionary in terms of a concept, right? I mean, I'm sure you know this, but like he based the entire thing on a news article he had read, I think from somewhere in Thailand, where people were dying in their sleep. And based on that alone, he was like, well, what?
So the way I remember this, and you know, whatever, I mean, my 10-year-old memory of like watching some DVD bonus feature, who knows, right? But but the way I remember what the story was, I think it was like just like a kind of one paragraph sort of news story, and it was I think it was about a family of Cambodian refugees where for very obvious and understandable reasons, you know, the teenage son in the family was having terrible nightmares all the time, you know, because of what they'd fled from, and in fact, so he was trying to keep himself awake all the time so he wouldn't have these nightmares, and in fact, I believe he had a like secret pot of coffee in the closet, and then like finally they brought in like a doctor and sedated him so he could get some sleep, and he had a heart attack and died.
I didn't know about the secret pot of coffee. Oh, that's creepy.
So, yeah, and I think what I really, you know, one of the things that I really like, I think it's just a good, like, even though there are these very like goofy moments in number 1, like the most obviously that like Ferris Bueller's Day Off thing with like the background noises so Nancy's boyfriend, you know, can trick his parents about where he's staying, and yeah, or I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy, which is the kind of thing that's like that they did lots of in the first movie. But part of the reason that the first movie, I think, managed to be so much creepier was that was an outlier, that for the most part of the first one, Freddy didn't really talk that much, right? There was the "this is God," right? But
he wasn't a meme. And he became one. He became a cultural icon, which was odd. I remember being a little kid and seeing pictures of Freddy, like posters and kids dressed as him, and him in music videos. He was actually in music videos and stuff like that, right? I'm sure you've seen them. But to me as a kid, it was weird because he's a horrifyingly looking human, right? It looks like someone who's like a burn victim who's got blades on his hand. Like it's not a soft image to be a mascot, and that's ultimately what he became. And the first one, like for the most part, you know, he was just silent or maybe like laughed. You know, there was like the noise of his blade scraping against the furnace, and that was like pretty creepy. And then, you know, look, by the third movie, that scene you referenced earlier, like his line before smashing that girl's head at the TV was "It's primetime, bitch," which sort of tells you how the character changed, you know, between then and the sequel. So I think that the more silent
Freddy was creepier than the Freddy who's doing like one-liners as he kills people. And I also think that there was the way that the atmosphere was in the first movie was like dreamy and creepy in a slightly different way. And I think it was also that concept you're talking about. I think that first movie is the only one that's really fully running with it, right? The scariest thing about the setup is that what you're trying to do to stay alive is something that's impossible, because you will eventually have to go back to sleep, right? There's no help in that. Sooner or later, you will fall asleep. And B, it's something that, especially because this is happening to teenagers, which, by the way, makes sense in the first one, but not really in any of the others, because he's supposed to be a child killer, but they can't actually have him killing children, or that would just be disturbing. You can
we can get into that too, because that outside of the fact that like I'm just not big on jump scares as being the only thing that makes a movie scary. Like you can have some in there, of course. I get it. It's a powerful cinematic technique, but I think one of the problems with the remake, and the reason I was upset to see it so high on your list, was that it just became one of those like sensationalist modern horror films. At least that's what they tried to do. And I liked the casting. I was really big on him. And I also liked the idea of let's explore the pedophilia aspect, which was always kind of hinted at, right? It was a little bit more subtle in the early film. So that's darker. That's a darker tone. But then was it PG-13? Am I wrong on that? Did they tone that one down?
That one, I'm not sure actually about that. I just rewatched it like a week ago, but yeah, so I was going to say, so that's the first thing I think that makes, the first one a little scarier. And the second thing is, because it's, what you're trying to avoid doing is falling asleep, right? The thing that's going to keep you alive is staying awake. So not only is that impossible, but it's something that as a teenager, as a minor, all of the adults in your life who love you and want to take care of you will constantly be trying to foil you in your trying to stay awake, right? Because of course they'll be trying to get you to get some sleep. And the first movie is really all about that, right? And then in the subsequent ones, I guess because they'd already done that, that's not really a big part of it, right? But which is I understand why not, but I also think it does make I think it makes the first one a little bit scarier, and I think it makes the first one a little bit more interesting.
Fair enough. I am okay, going through this as well. Freddy versus Jason, like a ton of fun. I'm not going to say for a second like that one wasn't just a blast to watch with friends, imbibe in whatever substances of your choice.
I told the story on the bonus episode, but I'll just mention it briefly. Also, a fun thing about that is that I got it out of it got me out of a traffic ticket since I was on the way back from the movie theater with my brother, and we got pulled over, and the cop said, "Oh, where are you coming from?" I was like, "Oh, the movie theater." He's like, "Oh, what did you say?" I said, "Freddy versus Jason." And then like he lit up. He was like, "Oh, who won?" And we had a 5-minute conversation about the movie. And then he was like, "Yeah, just go, whatever."
That's dope. That's okay. That's awesome. All right, that's a good story. But like, okay, ton of fun. All right, it was just like a Mortal Kombat the movie, basically, right? Like I love seeing the two of them go at it. But I wouldn't call that like a seminal part of the like, I don't know. It just felt like a WWE special, right? Like it was a blast, but I wouldn't put it in my top 3. I think you put it as number 3.
Well, I didn't, right? So we should be clear on this, right? So okay. This is Freddie DeBoer's list, right? So this is why Freddie, it's Freddie on Freddie, right? He was the guest for the bonus episode. Now I actually do agree with one of your criticisms of the list. We haven't gotten to that yet. Okay. But I do disagree with a few of the others, right? So I do think that.
Well, you only agree on one of them. Okay. Should I just ask which one do you agree on, and then everything else we can work our way through?
I agree. I agree about the remake. I actually when I was doing it, right? So we recorded the bonus episode sometime last week, and on there you can see, right, when we get to the remake, and he's kind of making his case for why it's not that bad. I was like, hey, I watched this movie once. It was in the theater when it came out. In fact, I watched it like on a day when me and my friend Ryan went. We We saw like 3 movies back to back at the theater. It was that, Hot Tub Time Machine. I don't remember what the other one was. But
All classic.
in any case, yeah, totally. And so, I remembered that they were trying to make it a little darker. I remember that they really, they took that suggestion that was always lurking in the background of that Freddie was a pedophile, right, as well as a killer, and they made it really explicit, kind of turned it up to 11.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's about what I remembered about it. So, he made, he kind of made his case for it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should go back and rewatch that. So then late last week, I think, maybe last Friday, I rewatched that. I was going to rewatch it with a friend from when I was an adjunct at Rutgers, and she had not seen, I was like, oh, hey, you want to watch the 2010 remake of Nightmare on Elm Street? And she's like, oh, yeah, sure. I've actually never seen either that or the original. I was like, okay, well, you have to watch the original. So we ended up watching the original and the 2010 back to back, which is brutal. I think I probably have now a much more negative reaction to it than I would have if I just watched it on its own.
Okay, good.
Because what that makes clear is that, they were trying, of course, it's a 2010 remake of an 80s movie. So of course they're trying to make it darker and grittier, because that's what all 2010 remakes did. And I'm not a huge fan of that trend in general, but also the real problem with it is that they were trying to make it, really like different and really dark and really gritty. But then they were also trying to do all of these classic beats from the original movie. There was like, oh, this was such a cool moment from the movie, so we need that to put that in the remake. But they didn't work anymore because
updated.
the tone was so different. Also, Fred, I was watching it, pointed out all of the teenagers in the movie. Like, I understand this is like true to some extent for but especially if you've just watched the original movie, where I think those actors actually were teenagers. Certainly nobody was older than their early 20s.
It was Johnny Depp's first film, wasn't it?
It was. Yep.
Yeah.
All of the teenagers in the 2010 remake looked like they were about 36.
As is the trend. Yeah.
It was really disconcerting, especially watching the back-to-back.
I do have a quick anecdote if you didn't know this already, because I've watched a lot of documentaries on the making of the series. Apparently, in the casting director's room, the daughter of the director was with him when they were looking at different actors. And when Johnny Depp came in, after he had finished the interview, she turned to her dad and was like, "Daddy, he's beautiful and he's going to be very famous." And then he was like, "Okay, let's hire him." That's what gave him the first thing. Yeah,
smart kid.
Yeah. Yeah, because he is both of those things. Okay, so if that's the only one you agree on, bumping that one down, you don't agree on moving episode 2 up beyond last place? You would place episode 2 above the Dream Child? The Dream Child, I like it because it's ridiculous. Same thing with the Dream Master, which was such a weird sequel to 3. The Dream Master is the worst film, because it's that terrible thing where you take everything that worked from 3 and then you just literally murder it. They killed off a bunch of the characters that everyone had fallen in love with.
The thing that was bad about Dream Master was that it was ridiculous to make such a big deal about all these kids having these special dream powers in 3, and then in the very next movie kill off most of them in the first 10 minutes. So I think that's a good criticism, but I think just taken as a standalone movie, I don't think it's very good. I think it's a pretty mediocre Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but I think it's fine. Whereas I think number 2, it had moments that could have been good, but I think it was the weakest of the sequels.
It's such a significant movie for so many reasons, though, and not just the fact that it was the biggest coming out film in horror history, and one of the biggest ones just in LGBTQ.
Although read in that way, right? So which is obviously right. I mean, I saw the documentary, and even before that, right? I remember my friend Richard, for years we talk about these movies, always referred to number 2 as the Rainbow Nightmare, right? It was pretty unsubtle. It's
very unsubtle. When you rewatch it, you're like, oh wow, this is a really gay movie. I didn't even think about that when I was watching it as a kid, but maybe because I didn't understand those concepts that well back then either.
No, totally. But So that's interesting. Of course, that again, if you're looking at it in that light, then of course it's. I mean, like literally, this is a movie where Freddy possessing this kid is played as a very unsubtle metaphor for gayness, and then the solution at the end is that his girlfriend like pulls him back out of it. So it's like the happy ending is he's back in the closet. So in those terms, it's not exactly a positive message. But I think apart from the subtext, I mean, I just think it's kind of a
no, Ben, you're. It's funny because I've got clips of the movie playing beside you right now. Just as you said that, you forgot the final death of the movie is that his girlfriend Freddie bursts out. Yeah, so ultimately Freddie takes her out in the bus. So, so I think I think it's a happy ending after all.
It's an interesting point, but no. Subtext aside, I mean, I think it just felt, I don't know, like it felt very, very thrown together to me. Like it seemed like, I mean, it was a little weird anyway that they were, he was possessing this kid, and then somehow that let him have all of these dream powers in the real world. I didn't really get that. I think, and somebody in the chat asks, is Freddy a predatory older man or the metaphysical embodiment of the protagonist's struggle? I think it's both, right? Like in the movie. So again, I'm not convinced that this is a particularly gay friendly message, of the film. But even aside from that, right? I guess I didn't think it had much going for it as a movie. Like if you just subtract that and you just think like, okay, so without worrying about the subtext, right? Just as a movie, right? What's good about this? And I gotta say, not much, right? I mean, like maybe you can make an argument that it's not, that it's not as bad as Dream Master. I'm kind of into Dream Child, actually. I don't know why, but
what is it about Dream Child? Oh, my stream just crashed. Oh no, that's okay. I have 30 seconds to get it back. But yeah, tell me about that. What you like? I'm gonna see if I can.
I mean, it's sort of operatically goofy in this way that's like so ridiculous that it makes me like it again, with the reverse, with the way it's kind of set up, like the Omen, the way that they've got one of the weird things about the Freddy movies is that there's this like little, like there's always some like Catholic stuff going on around the edges, even in the first one. But that's the movie where they like really, really run with it, right? I think that's where you get the origin story, the son of 1,000 maniacs chants.
That's true.
It's completely ridiculous, but it's a lot of fun to watch. But actually, on that subject, right? Because I did just rewatch the original last week. Mm-hmm. Like that is a weird thing that it's like that it's never, in the first movie, like. It's sort of around the edges that like all of the characters seem to be, Catholic, right? There are these crucifixes that are hanging out in bedrooms and stuff that, you're certainly not going to get those crucifixes in Protestant households. Those are like big hulking crucifixes with the actual body of Jesus on them.
So what's the subtext there?
I don't know. And one of the lines in the jump rope song is 5-6, better grab your crucifix.
Yeah, it is.
And so it's just this thing that's there, and it's not really clear why. And then it comes back in a big way. I think starting in 3, like it because that's the one where you have the nun, who turns out to be Freddy's mom, and you have. Like for some reason, the way that he has to be killed is by burying him on consecrated ground, and then they really go nuts with it. A couple movies later with Dream Child, and then after that, they just kind of forget about it again for the remainder of what movies were made.
So my last criticism of this cursed list is that. The New Nightmare should also move up a couple places. I don't know why Wes Craven's New Nightmare is in place number 6 above Freddy's Dead and also A Nightmare on Elm Street the reboot, but we've already agreed on that. Okay, Freddy versus Jason is better just for entertainment value, but A New Nightmare on there's a lot of things that don't work about it, but also it was ambitious. I would give it extra points for its ambition and just in how meta everything was. I read, this is going to sound really weird, I read the novelization of that book before I saw the movie, because the movie was delayed in Canada for some reason, but the novelization of it came out, and I was really excited for the movie, so I ended up reading the novels, and it's horrible, as you can imagine. But then I was like, imagine trying to wrap your head around the idea of this weird meta narrative of the movie within the movie within the movie, read within the novelization of the film. It was really hard to understand.
Yeah, I can see liking it for its ambition, but I think New Nightmare, I tend to think that people like it a little bit more than it deserves because it was trying to do something really interesting. I just don't think it was a particularly successful version of it. I mean, it's one of those things. It's it's like when you find out that there are some bits of iconic Led Zeppelin songs that are stolen from Old Spirit, songs, and then you go listen to the original, and you're like, yeah, okay, this is kind of interesting, but this I don't know, even within a sort of framework of capitalist property rights, I don't know if they actually deserve this big settlement, because it's not like if Zeppelin hadn't done that, this would have been this wild hit, right? This is an okay song, part of which was stolen to turn it into an amazing song. And I think there's something roughly similar is going on there, that I think New Nightmare was a big inspiration on a lot of later, more interesting meta horror movies.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no question.
I think most obviously Cabin in the Woods, the temple at the end of Cabin in the Woods, when you find out it's all an elaborate human sacrifice, just was from New Nightmare.
Spoilers, man. Spoilers. The chat is going to eat me alive.
Yeah. Come on. We've been talking about these movies for
I know.
An hour now. You don't think we're going to talk about things that happen in them?
Well, one of my favorite things was when my buddy was watching the trailer for the second Lord of the Rings films. At the very end of the trailer, they realize that Gandalf the White returns, and then someone in the theater yelled out "Oh, God damn it, spoilers!" And then someone else the books have been out for 40 years, dude.
Yeah, no, my favorite example of this ever was when the movie The Great Gatsby movie came out a couple years ago, and Jay McInerney wrote this article in I don't know, the New Yorker or something, where it was okay, the point of the essay was, this is why this book is basically unfilmable and why no movie version of it is going to be good. And then I was reading this article online, and somebody in the comments was complaining about spoilers for the plot of The Great Gatsby. I'm like, really? Not only is this almost a 100-year-old book, but this is a 100-year-old book that everybody read in high school.
You know what we got to start doing? We got to start doing spoiler warnings for the Bible. That's it from now on. And then Jesus was resurrected. Whoa, buddy, come on! I haven't gotten there yet. All right, I'm only halfway through.
That's right. I'm just starting the New Testament.
No, I'm working my way through the Old. Come on.
Yeah. Fair enough. All right. Well, I did want to give you a chance to register all of that, but since I know there are people in the chat who understandably what the hell is this? You guys gonna just talk about this the entire time?
Normally, well, especially from your channel. My channel's used to silliness, by the way. Oh, so I should introduce myself, by the way. If you're not familiar with me, everybody, I'm Lance of the Serfs, frequent collaborator and friend of Mr. Ben Burgess. The two of us have been crossing paths for some time. We overlap a lot in the Majority Report, Michael Brooks show, may he rest in power kind of crowd. And then at which point, I guess Ben said he wanted to discuss a little bit about the Nightmare on Elm Street series, but I think we're also going to move on to the politique now, right? We can.
Yeah. I think we've. I like this, right? I want you to, maybe in a year you can come back and we can do, Jason or something. But
absolutely.
but so this is fun. But yeah, we should talk about some of the other things that have been going on because that has been quite a bit, right? It's been an eventful few days. So for example, just yesterday, Jeremy Corbyn was suspended from the Labour Party, which he was the
I have some huge thoughts on this, by the way. But please go on.
which he was the leader of literally a few months ago, and now is at least temporarily not part of anymore. And in particular, what I find remarkable about this is that it wasn't even that he I think it would have been bad enough from my perspective if what they'd done is said, hey, here's this report about things you mishandled as the Labour Party leader, and so we're going to kick you out for your transgressions from when you were the leader, right? I think that would have been bad enough. But what happened was I think much more absurd than that, which is that there was this report coming out, condemning him, for things that happened when he was Labour leader. And then he said, I disagree with the critique. And then proving that disparaging the boot is a bootable offense, he was kicked out for disagreeing with the report slamming him. And just to, without devolving too far into what a battery here, just to put this into perspective, a previous leader of the Labour Party, who's still a member of good standing, is one Anthony Blair, who was the co-leader of the drive to invade Iraq, and there have been some pretty damning reports that have come out about that in the last 17 years, I guess, since 2003, when between the Downing Street memo and actual investigations that were done about that later, and he certainly expressed his disagreement with them, but that boot apparently you're allowed to disparage.
So when doing I guess some cursory research on this topic, I was asking my chat as well. I was like, does anyone have the examples in which Jeremy Corbyn was deeply anti-Semitic? Because to me, all I could think of was that he was critical of Israel, but the government of Israel, by the way, he would never specifically say like I despise Israelis. It was I'm critical of Benjamin Netanyahu and everything going on over there, which is completely valid and fair. It's a very reasonable response to have, the Palestinian people, etc. Outside of that, there wasn't really any examples. And so I was like, well, that was enough to be successfully tarnished by the right-wing media smear campaign that was taking place in Britain. Now, is there something else to that? Am I not really. I mean, there are things, I think if you're talking to somebody, and yeah, by the way, Jonas in the chat says he wasn't disagreeing with the report, though. Really, he was pushing back. He said he agreed with the report, but pushed back against exaggerated claims of anti-Semitism in other places. I think that he put out the statement. I read the whole statement. It was 6 paragraphs long. And the first 4 paragraphs were like, hey, anti-Semitism is really bad. If the Labour Party hasn't done enough to combat it, then, it should, blah, 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 blah. And then the part, though, at the end, right, that was the pretext for kicking him out was, while of course one anti-Semite, in the party is too much, I think the prevalence of this has really been exaggerated for political and factional reasons, and that's what it was based, and that's what it was based on. But as far as what he himself has done, for the most part, I actually haven't seen very many people claim that Jeremy Corbyn himself, I've never really seen anybody say, "Hey, remember this anti-Semitic thing that Jeremy Corbyn said?" But that's the point, right?
It's mostly just some very sketchy guilt by association stuff that it seems to be mostly along the lines of he defended this person and this person did or said that. And then half the time when you get down to the end of the rabbit hole and you say, okay, here's the thing this other person did or said, it doesn't really seem.
So apparently under their own investigation, they uncovered 0.3% of members of his cabinet had said things that you could construe as being anti-Semitic. So that to me, he's already acknowledging. Well, that I'm not entirely sure. I think it might not even been the cabinet. Sorry, maybe the party itself.
Okay,
like
that might make that big more sense.
Yeah, sorry. So such a small fraction, right? And then he himself had not said something that was specifically anti-Semitic. The comments that he got tarnished for again were criticizing the treatment of the Palestinian people. That was enough. And like people in my chat are saying the same thing. Like I've heard he's anti-Semitic, but I don't know why. But they were so good at weaponizing that in Britain. They were so good at just ad nauseum. Drowning us in this idea that Jeremy Corbyn, yes, he just hates the Jewish people, right? That it just became almost a soundbite. And then I found out about this, Ben. I don't know if you knew this. This was astonishing to me.
Okay.
Did you know that Boris Johnson, the current prime minister, has written a novel in 2004? Did you know about this novel?
I do remember hearing a little bit about this at the time.
Okay.
Not at the time, but I think like maybe right after he became prime minister, somebody dug it up. And I only vaguely remember hearing about this, though. You're gonna have to fill me in.
Okay, well, see, I didn't know about it at all. But so in 2004, he wrote the book 72 Virgins, in which he blames the Jews as controlling the media. That's right. Yeah. So how is the current prime minister, the same man, by the way, who said what, that women wearing the hijab are akin to letterboxes in the mail slots and other racist things like that? How was he just totally fine? Just, it's, that's just, he's a little scamp. That's just Boris being Boris. Yes, that book, that book with all these weird stereotypes, just him doing his thing. And Jeremy Corbyn is the anti-Semite, right?
Awesome.
Yeah, like that's the world we live in.
No, it is. I mean, like it's, and it's really like, especially I think that the thing that I find most amazing about this is that if this were like a narrative that was being pushed by people who generally had pretty sensitive antennae for things like this, that I might still disagree with it, but I wouldn't be quite as exasperated about it.
Of course.
But so many of the people who are pushing this and who have pushed this, about Corbyn, when he was leader, are people who normally are exactly the same people who would tell you, everybody is accused of racism for everything. It's nonsense, it's witch hunting, but it's like in this one case, right? They just have very, very, very sensitive antennae, for anything that could be construed as anti-Semitism or even like some sort of association with anti-Semitism. Like, was it somebody who's an artist who made a mural, and some people thought the depictions in the mural were anti-Semitic.
But in that case, it was that he didn't condemn it properly or something to that effect.
It was like that, right? It's not like he was. I mean, nobody's claiming that he was like doing initial sketches that led to the mural or something. It was just his reaction to the controversy about the mural, right? It's all kind of stuff like that. And I think it's a really, I don't know. I think it's a really revealing and disturbing case, because I think that like this is the kind of thing that you're going to see anytime there's a big left breakthrough, right? Like if Bernie Sanders had won the primary, I don't think they would have done anti-Semitism because it comes from a family of Holocaust survivors. But I think they would have found something, right? Like they would.
Let's be totally frank. That was the only reason they weren't employing that tactic, or at least weaponizing it in America the way they were in over in the UK. Yeah. And they even tried. I don't know if you recall. There was a couple calls. Yeah. There was like anytime there was a quote of Bernie Sanders saying like, "I support." The Palestinian people, that was enough for them to say like, well, Bernie Sanders flirting with the Holocaust, we see things like that, and like, ooh, yikes, like this one doesn't quite work.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's been tons of it with Ilhan Omar, and there was a little bit. There was a little bit with Bernie where people would be like, why is Bernie Sanders? Why does he associate with Ilhan Omar or with there were like 3 or 4 figures who like they were more comfortable accusing of anti-Semitism. They were accusing Bernie himself, and they bring that in, right? So, and of course, and I totally agree, right? Somebody in the chat points out like one of the most despicable things about this is that it really devalues the accusation, right? Because if you've heard people accused of being anti-Semites, 50 times, because trying to grind some sort of like factional political axe, or you're or you're just trying to police the boundaries of what people can say about Palestine, then when there are cases, as there inevitably will be, because as I remember David Feldman had a really nice line on this as show once. We were talking about this, and he just did this like deadly serious setup, and he was like, "Look, anti-Semitism will always exist. Perfectly timed pause. As long as I do this show." But anti-Semitism is not going anywhere, and so then
it's a tale of
yeah, of course, right. When the real thing does rear its ugly head, I think the effect of this is going to desensitize a lot of people to it, that would otherwise take it more seriously. And yeah, it's incredible.
What
were you going to say?
Well, I was like, while you're here, can I spill some tea?
Ooh, please. Yeah.
Well, what was your take on? Okay, I got two different flavors. All right. We'll start with the green tea. What was your take on the? I know you're. I've listened to your. I mean, I hosted one of your debates on the idea of voting for Joe Biden as a measure. But your take on the backlash to say Noam Chomsky, because I think you did a couple podcasts on the subject. Either with Brianna Joy, I can't remember. Sorry.
Yeah. So Brianna Joy Gray, who used to be Bernie Sanders' press secretary, has started just very recently a new podcast called Bad Faith, which she co-hosts with Virgil Texas from Chapo Trap House, and in the very brief life of the show, the most famous thing, the thing that went super viral, were these clips of Brianna. Mostly Brianna, but also Virgil, arguing with Noam Chomsky about the election, and I think that there are certain, my take on this is that Chomsky lands in the right place. There's certain ways that he frames it that, I don't necessarily think he's making the case the right way all the time, but I think he does land in the right place, and I've tried. Yeah, I actually did write one thing, co-wrote with Matt McManus. It's an Aereo magazine, came out a couple days ago, that was about this, that I think referred to that. I wrote something else that addressed it in a more direct way, which I'd like to. Actually, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do anything with it, especially before the election, because Jacobin. The election is on Tuesday, and. Jacobin couldn't take it because there's a thin line, but with that 501c3 status, it's okay to do things about the election that are even very polemical, but you can't quite come out and say this is who you should vote for. Which is fair, right? But in any case, look, I think that what frustrates, just to sort of give a little bit of background of my own thinking about this, right? The first vote I ever cast was for Ralph Nader in 2000. I voted for him again in 2004, and I voted for the Green Party candidates in 2008, 2012, and 2016. And so I'm very used to having this argument from the other end, right? I think there was a long time where, in fact, probably the primary thing that I did politically was argue with people about things like this. And
at the time, you didn't as the Canadian watching the whole. I think what was it, Bush v. Kerry. I was in the mind, I was like, how can anyone possibly vote for Nader? I like what he stands for, but at the same time, if we have if we have a second term of Bush, we're gonna ramp things up. That we're gonna continue the war in Iraq. This is horrifying. I mean, similar arguments to what's being proposed now.
Yeah. I think okay. I can tell you what I said at the time, or I can tell you what I think now, right? But I think that part of the reason I think that it was easier for me to justify that position then is that so much of the attention was on the Iraq issue, and that's, I think, one of the places where it was the least clear that Kerry was actually going to be better, right? He voted for the war. He was actually talking about surging troop levels. It was very. He even did this very John Kerry-ish thing where when he was directly asked about whether he would have voted for it again, and knowing what he knows now, he sort of gave 3 different answers. So yeah, and of course, what I would have pointed out then is that, look, all the reasons that you guys justly hate George W. Bush, Kerry voted for all this shit. He voted for the Patriot Act, he voted for No Child Left Behind.
Mm-hmm.
So I do feel, obviously, as you know very well, different now, right? Because I think one of the first things I ever said about this was on your Twitch stream. There's a video of that people can find, and I obviously did that debate with Nico House just like a week ago or something about that topic, right? So I think so, and I guess the reason why I'm a little bit critical of the way that Chomsky makes the argument, even though I think he lands in the right place, is that even though I've shifted on this, right? That for a variety of reasons, I know how things sound to people who are on the other side of this argument, and I think that, like, when you really ramp it up to these like super apocalyptic predictions, I think a lot of people will kind of roll their eyes because they, for one thing, if they've been around for a while, right, they've heard this stuff before. If Bush is reelected in 2004, then we'll, invade Iran and this or that'll happen, right?
That was what I was saying.
And then I think the more it comes off as like moral scolding, I think the less effective it is. That I think a lot of people, if they are really in this mind space of like, no, fuck you, I'm not going to do that. I think that's like the worst possible way to approach them. And then particularly, I think since so much of what drives this position is justifiable skepticism about what Democrats will do when they're in office, I think anything that seems to be overly credulous about that, I think is just going to be a non-starter, because I think when you start talking about, climate change is so important. It's like, yeah, climate change is important, but what exactly is Biden really going to do about it? And, maybe you can find on a campaign website somewhere into the issues section where there are a bunch of things that sound great that he says he's going to do, but then come on, right? When Obama.
Well, it's one of those situations where the bar is so low on the other end. I mean, as long as he's not gutting the EPA and filling it with people who don't believe that the EPA should exist in the first place, and denying climate change is actually being even real. Like, if he rejoins the Paris climate agreement, which I don't think is something Hillary Clinton would have done. I don't think she would have left it.
No, I get all of that, but I also think that part of the problem is that I think people are justifiably frustrated at being told, because they've, how many election cycles has it been now where the climate change argument for the Democrat is at least they don't deny that it exists.
Right. Don't get me wrong. It's not a good thing. Yeah.
And that's very, and at a certain point, it's like, okay, but like, how much credit do you get for just like accepting that it is a problem, but you're not going to do anything about it that would be remotely adequate to the scope of it, right? And I think that it's a little unclear how much of a difference it makes whether you're doing these really inadequate incremental things, right? I was going to say it also comes from a place of unbelievable privilege, because like I understand the argument from Brianna Joy Gray that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. If you look at the median wealth of Black families in America, that is on a downward trend, which by 2054 it's estimated that it'll reach $0. So it's like there's no argument to be said that it doesn't matter who I vote for, I'm going to get a better life on the other end, right? Like that, I understand the frustration on that end as well. Totally, right. I also wish that. I also wish that Chomsky had addressed that in a more direct way than he did, right? Because what Brianna was doing, like, in some ways it's a little frustrating because, of course, most people who make that, like, who argue about the election and argue for it in a really identity-based way are making the opposite argument, right? Like most Black leftists who are going to make a race-based argument about the election are arguing for voting for Biden, which isn't to say they're right, of course, but I think there's something about like, okay, I don't know how far the as a argument, really can go there, right? Given that you have so many people making parallel arguments on the other side. But that said, I think that what she's bringing up is a real thing, right? That that if you say because I think her argument, right, to try to steel man it a little bit, right, is going to be something like, okay, basically nothing positive is going to change for the people who are being hurt most by the system. Poor black and brown people in the United States, or at least the people who are domestically hurt most by the system. Obviously, people who hurt most by the system don't live in the United States, but nothing fundamentally is going to change for those people. There's this downward trend is going to continue. And at least if we threaten to withhold our votes, we can exercise some sort of leverage that might win important concessions. And if we don't do that, then we're essentially just infinitely putting off. We're just infinitely putting off doing anything about the things that are making these people suffer, right? So like when Chomsky was talking about climate change and saying, do you want your grandchildren to be underwater, right? And she says, but a lot of people aren't thinking about that because their current circumstances are so awful, and you're not really addressing that. And I do wish, even though I disagree with her conclusion, I do wish that he'd kind of gone into the teeth of that argument a little bit more than he did. But what I would say about that is that, of course, you do want, like, whatever your solution is, right? It like those considerations should be at the heart of it. But the question is, what does doing right by those people look like, right? Like what is it? What would actually be a strategy that would help? I mean, so when you get beyond the peripheral stuff, like somebody in the chat reminds me, yeah, sure, I think rhetorically, one of her best points was he kept saying voting takes 10 minutes. Of course, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people stand in line all day to vote.
11 hours. I can't relate to that at all, especially like being a Canadian. I voted recently. We had an election last week, and it took me all of 5 minutes to do. Like I like to me, the idea of not only having to wait in line for an hour, 2 hours, 9 hours. Like what do you do? You need 3 meals? You need to go to the bathroom multiple times. You're surrounded by other people who might have COVID. It could be raining. That's astounding to me. You're not paid. You're not given the day off. You could lose a day at work. You could get fired from your job. You might miss an entire day of school. And then we're like, well, why doesn't the youth folk come out? It's because not everyone has that whole day to do that.
No, absolutely. I mean, it depends on the state, right? There are states right now where you can. You can, like Michigan, certainly you can register online and you can get your mail-in ballot sent to you, right? Like you can do all that online, right? All you have to do is fill it out and take it to the post office. But then there are these places like Florida and Georgia where you've seen these nightmarish scenes, especially in black neighborhoods, right? Like that shouldn't be, like, we should emphasize that, right? Like those are the places most likely. If
you haven't had your voter ID stripped from you, or indigenous communities in the United States, where like a lot of those communities, based on the way the reservations works, it's actually the state that owns the land, so they're not allowed to own addresses. They just have usually like trailer homes and stuff like that built upon the reservation itself, so they don't have the ability to even get a voter registration, which is just again an astounding suppression of voters.
Absolutely, right. So, but I think that I think that. I think that was like he, I think he was obviously, he was overstating the case about that. And I think she did like rhetorically get a lot of power out of that. But I think the core of her argument is this thing about leverage. Mm-hmm. And this is part of the reason that I disagree, because I think, okay, if you're not just making a symbolic statement, right? If you think you're doing something else, what's the else? And basically, I hear 2 answers. One is the Breonna Joy Gray answer: you're exerting some sort of leverage. And the other is that you're like starting the process of building this party that will eventually be able to compete with the Democrats, Republicans, and win elections. And so a big part of the reason why ultimately I disagree is that I don't think either of those are plausible strategies. I think that if we are ever lucky enough to get an electorally viable third party in the United States, And a lot of times people will make analogies here to other countries that just have very different electoral systems, that you can get. It's much easier to start minor parties in countries with parliamentary systems where they can be like junior partners and coalitions and things like that. It's just a totally different situation. But given the United States electoral system, I think if we are ever lucky enough to get a viable third party, we're not going to get it by some 2% of the vote fringe party somehow slowly building into a 51% party over the course of 20 election cycles. I just don't think it would happen that way. I think that if it ever happened, it would happen the way it happened last time when the Republican Party was formed in the 19th century, which is that there was a previous major party, the Whigs, that basically came apart at the seams. And when that happened, the anti-slavery wing of the Whigs essentially became the Republican Party. But crucially, if you go back and look at that history, the Republicans didn't start out getting 2% of the vote and somehow build up to winning an election against major parties, because they were preceded by the collapse of an existing major party. So they came into the world as a major party. And I think that's how it would have to happen realistically. I just don't see any other way. And then, so I don't think that's viable. And then when it comes to the idea of exerting leverage, I guess all I would say is that I think that we tried that, right? Like I think that in 2000, 3 million people voted for Ralph Nader. That's by far the biggest left-wing third-party vote total, I think, since Henry Wallace in 1948. And not only did that not spook the Democrats into moving to the left, 4 years later, they nominated John Kerry and Joe Lieberman. They could not, in some ways, All right. I was wrong about that. Sorry. Lieberman was Gore's running mate. They nominated John Kerry and John Edwards, right? I think I said that.
John Edwards. Wow, there's a name I haven't heard forever.
Yeah, I know, right? Blast for the blast for the past. Fun thing about John Edwards, by the way, just incidentally, if you anybody who's a fan of the novelist J. McNerney, he wrote who I mentioned earlier with the Great Gatsby essay. He wrote a book in the 80s called Story of My Life, about this very troubled young woman, as a cocaine problem, this and that and the other thing. And it came out later that the actual person who McInerney briefly dated, who the character was based on, was John Edwards' mistress when all that happened in 2008.
No way. No way. Whoa, the lore runs deep. I had no idea.
It does.
Oh my.
But anyway, whatever. It clearly didn't work. Right,
absolutely, even look recently, right? And rather than even acquiesce any power towards, a SOCDEM, not even a leftist, a far leftist, it was a SOCDEM. They would rather coalesce the old, decrepit Joe Biden and throw all their hats behind that, knowing how it alienated and isolated the entire progressive.
After 2016, when Jill Stein got more than the margin of difference between Clinton and Trump in multiple swing states.
They do not care. They
do not care, right? They're never going to respond to leftists staying home or voting third party by saying, "Ooh, I guess we better become leftist to appeal to these people." They'll always respond by saying, "Oh, all right, I guess we need to try harder to get those moderate Republican suburban votes," because given the choice, right, if you need more votes from somewhere, you're not getting them from where you are right now, you're going to go find them in the place that's not going to require you to piss off your donor class. So I think I don't see why that would be any different, right? So I don't think the leverage thing really works, which I guess is kind of, in some ways, is kind of a dismal result. It's okay, we can't have there's nothing we can do with our votes in general elections that's going to exert meaningful leverage on the Democrats. I mean, even if they rhetorically gave some concessions, which, by the way, Biden actually has, but even if they did that.
And I say I'd like Clinton actually went pretty above and beyond in terms of creating that committee in order to be able to get them to exchange ideas. And it does feel as if he's listening to them more so. They've actually got a bit of a seat at the table, albeit maybe even a ceremonial one. Fine.
Yeah,
but at least
the question, right? If you're cynical about it, if you think it is ceremonial, then I don't know what's going to change, right? By exerting more leverage, right? So anyway, I don't think either of those things are going to work. I don't think there's anything we can do with our votes in general. I think like the only things we can do with our votes in the general election are help Trump win, help Biden win, or make a purely symbolic statement with no effect in the real world. And look, if I lived in California, I'd probably make the purely symbolic statement, because why not?
Oh, of course, yeah, this doesn't matter.
You know, but I'm not going to. You know, but I didn't, right? I voted for Biden because I live in Michigan, and in last time Trump won Michigan by 0.23%. And I guess, like, I don't want to just, you know, take up all of our brief time together here for the next few minutes by recapping everything I said in the debate with Nico. People can go watch that here on the Serfs channel. But I think that the biggest thing to me is that it actually does matter, even putting aside like individual personalities, putting aside, you know, like all of that stuff, right? Like I think even putting aside like the scariest things about Trump as an individual president, you know, of which there are many, I think that it actually does matter whether the Democratic machine is in control of the executive branch or the Republican machine is in control of the executive branch. Because even though those are both capitalist parties, they both represent very different strategies for managing the system. And I think especially when you get into stuff like the thing that I'm obsessed with, which is the appointments to the National Labor Relations Board, don't get talked about nearly enough in this. And that was actually the thing that frustrated me most in the debate with Nico, because there was never a point where he really addressed that. Like he'd sort of say, oh, Biden has done this or that bad thing. Yeah, true. Right. Biden probably would do this or that bad thing. Yeah, true. Right. But what about these appointments, right, to the NLRB, to the courts, that are things that do make a difference for the terrain on which we fight capital going forward? And I don't think that emphasizing that means deprioritizing the people that Breonna Joy Gray is talking about, because I think that, for one thing, building powerful labor unions historically has been one of the few things that actually has narrowed the income gap between white and black Americans. You know, certainly, you know, people were talking about this a lot recently with the, you know, with when Trump was trying to undermine the post office, and there was a lot of very welcome rediscovery by a lot of people of the ways that the post office has historically been an engine of racial equality and upward mobility by creating like good paying public sector union jobs that, you know, that were oftentimes, at one point historically at least, the only jobs like that, you know, right, you could get as a black person in America. And I also think, just in general, if we're going to do anything about any of these things, like either the stuff that Chomsky wants to talk about or the stuff that Breonna Joy Gray wants to talk about, like if we're going to do anything about any of these issues, I think it can't ultimately, we have to see beyond just putting pressure on centrists to be better. We have to think about how could we actually beat centrists and have somebody like Bernie Sanders be the nominee. And I think that you do need that. I mean, I guess maybe this is just where I put on my most like old fashioned, you know, commie hat with the, you know, like faded red star on it or whatever.
Oh,
but
I thought you were going to go full rad lib. I was like, oh, here comes a Libby take. It's coming.
You know, I think that any way that we could have a left that could like really meaningfully win political battles in the United States, I just think there needs to be an organized working class at the base of that, or else I don't know what we're doing.
I totally agree. And just one last point, because I wanted to say this. The thing that I found the most frustrating was the one question that was posed to Nico during that debate, in which was like, what is the biggest difference for you in terms of what you'll do in your activism, whether it's Donald Trump who wins or whether it's Joe Biden who wins? And he's like, the exact same thing. I was like, oh, because I really wanted to respond with, then why not do it against the person who doesn't like try and erode every kind of like system that you may like? To me, you're just ceding ground, right? Whereas in the other opportunity, there's less destruction and you can do the same thing you'll do in both scenarios. I don't understand then what is the argument being put forth here? Maybe I'm wrong, but
no, absolutely right. Like it's very unclear what the argument is, because if like it really seems like if he concedes that there are places where it would be worse for the left if Trump was president than Biden was president, then it seems like his two options are either to say, oh, but here are these places where it would be worse if Biden was president. And the closest we came to that was something about like people being upset about one of the Avengers actors not going to a Biden thing.
That's right.
Like, it was really weird. I didn't understand why he was talking
Goddamn
about
Chris's. I can't tell them apart. They're all so good looking and white. What's going on? That's not me impersonating him. That's me, by the way. I genuinely can't tell them apart.
Fair enough. Oh, and one last in the last few minutes that we have together, one last news story that's happened in the last week. Well, actually, we'll just do two for one real quick in the last few minutes. So I think oddly enough, this feels weird even to say it because I've gotten out of practice, but two good things happened in the last couple of weeks. Bolivia and Chile.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
nothing but amazing things to say. The Bolivian one, especially. I would say a footnote. I'm guessing this would be an echo chamber for your listeners, but anyone who wasn't aware, that's not simply an electoral victory. To say that, like, just vote and that's the end of the story would be short-sighted. That was actually a very concerted people's movement that got it to that point. I mean, you're talking about pushing up against a fascist coup, led by yet again a non-indigenous leader. Trying to put forward a very imperial agenda, which is going to be obviously congruent to whatever the United States wants. That's them pushing back against that and getting it to the point where a vote was even possible. So just in case anyone isn't totally up to date on that.
Yeah,
but
no,
yeah,
right.
that was fantastic news. That was putting joy in my heart. American news depresses me. Actually, a lot of world news depresses me. Okay, Europe is not doing much better COVID wise. Every major European country is going into some form of extreme lockdown, one after the other. I think it was France, now Spain, and Germany is pretty close by. So,
although I will say that there are, at least as of about a week ago, which is when I checked this, the only two European countries that I saw that have worse deaths per thousand than the United States are Spain and Belgium. That's it. So the other 6 countries in the world that are doing worse as far as COVID deaths, at least, are all in the global south. And there are countries that are in the global south that are not doing worse at all, right? There are plenty that are actually doing better.
Venezuela.
Yeah, Cuba has been doing great. I mean, I understand it's not a like scientific controlled experiment, because obviously Cuba is an island, that helps. But if you compare like the size and population of Cuba to places in Europe or places in like states in the United States that are comparable, like Cuba's done very well on COVID.
Vietnam as well.
Yeah.
Who knew? Those goddamn commies. The communists.
Yeah. I mean, even China, of course, has the most mixed record out of those countries. But
except I don't know if you saw this week there was a massive outbreak in China, and it happened to happen like it does in most places in labor. It was happening in the forced re-education labor camps for the Uyghur minorities. It's where they've just had a recent COVID outbreak, and a massive one as well.
Yeah, and and they certainly did. They certainly. I mean, I think there's plenty. It's a fine line to walk, because I think some of this is really exaggerated because of sort of war drums propaganda.
Of course,
States.
Yeah.
But it is also true that they did mess it up initially, right? Like that they were really understating, what was going on and trying to do damage control when it was first happening. And also, not for nothing, the reason that it all, my understanding is that our best, maybe this is out of date information, but my understanding is our best guess about how it all originated, is that COVID was brought to us by deregulation, the lifting of Chinese regulations on the sale of wild meat at wet markets. So good job there.
That's not what it was from. Haven't you been watching your Joe Rogans, your Alex Jones? Like, come on. It was weaponized in a lab, and come on, we all know that. All right, this synthetic virus brought over to us to control our minds and make the frogs gay.
Yeah. Speaking of which, actually, we really, I should have done this before we.
you were like, Lance, can we start early? Because I have something I have to be at, so I have to cut it exactly at this time. And
I know, right? And then like
we can put a final thought on it, Ben. I'm keeping you. You're probably furious at me right now.
Yeah, Alex. So, am I understanding this right? That the Joe Rogan Election Day special is going to be Alex Jones and Kyle Kalinske? Because that's amazing.
You have that 100% correct.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
I might not even do anything in that case.
Do you want to join mine? I've got a whole bunch of bread tubers coming on.
I might do that.
Okay. Like just pop in at any time. It's just drink all day. You can bring your finest scotch or whiskey, whatever you have, and yeah, just come in or pop in or pop out whenever you want.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Lance. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ben. It was a pleasure as always.
All right, bye.
And now I have to find